Hi, welcome to Bringing the Great Thanksgiving Lesson to Your Classroom, a lesson plan and best practices. I'm Maria from StoryCorps. Today we'll introduce you to StoryCorps and to our annual Great Thanksgiving Lesson. We'll give you an introduction to teaching the Great Lesson, go through a short Q&A, and then review some resources with you. We hope you'll leave this workshop with the tools to engage and empower your students in both the classroom and community through conversation. Help your students become active listeners, record intergenerational conversations, and use our free technology to record and archive these conversations both with StoryCorps and at the Library of Congress. Let's get started. So what is StoryCorps? StoryCorps is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to recording, preserving, and sharing the stories of people of all backgrounds and beliefs. We do this in order to build connections between people and create a more just, compassionate world. I think our founder, Dave Isay, introduces StoryCorps best in his 2015 TED Talk.
Tonight, I'm going to try to make the case that inviting a loved one, a friend, or even a stranger to record a meaningful interview with you just might turn out to be one of the most important moments in that person's life and in yours. When I was 22 years old, I was lucky enough to find my calling when I fell into making radio stories. At almost the exact same time, I found out that my dad, who I was very, very close to, was gay. I was taken completely by surprise. We were a very tight-knit family, and I was crushed. At some point in one of our strained conversations, my dad mentioned the Stonewall riots. He told me that one night in 1969, a group of young Black and Latino drag queens fought back against the police at a gay bar in Manhattan called the Stonewall Inn, and how this sparked the modern gay rights movement. It was an amazing story, and it piqued my interest. So I decided to pick up my tape recorder and find out more. With the help of a young archivist named Michael Shirker, we tracked down all of the people we could find who had been at the Stonewall Inn that night. Recording these interviews, I saw how the microphone gave me the license to go places I otherwise never would have gone and talk to people I might not otherwise ever have spoken to. I had the privilege of getting to know some of the most amazing, fierce, and courageous human beings I had ever met. It was the first time the story of Stonewall had been told to a national audience. I dedicated the program to my dad. It changed my relationship with him, and it changed my life. Over the next 15 years, I made many more radio documentaries, working to shine a light on people who are rarely heard from in the media. Over and over again, I'd see how the simple act of being interviewed could mean so much to people, particularly those who'd been told that their stories didn't matter. I could literally see people's backs straighten as they started to speak into the microphone. In 1998, I made a documentary about the last flophouse hotels on the Bowery in Manhattan. Guys stayed up in these cheap hotels for decades. They lived in cubicles the size of prison cells, covered with chicken wire so you couldn't jump from one room into the next. Later, I wrote a book on the men with the photographer Harvey Wang. I remember walking into a flophouse with an early version of the book and showing one of the guys his page. He stood there staring at it in silence. Then he grabbed the book out of my hand and started running down the long, narrow hallway, holding it over his head, shouting, "I exist! I exist!" In many ways, I Exist became the clarion call for StoryCorps, this crazy idea that I had a dozen years ago. The thought was to take documentary work and turn it on its head. Traditionally, broadcast documentary has been about recording interviews to create a work of art or entertainment or education that's seen or heard by a whole lot of people. But I wanted to try something where the interview itself was the purpose of this work and see if we could give many, many, many people the chance to be listened to in this way. So in Grand Central Terminal, 11 years ago, we built a booth where anyone can come to honor someone else by interviewing them about their life. You come to this booth and you're met by a facilitator who brings you inside. You sit across from, say, your grandfather for close to an hour and you listen and you talk. Many people think of it as, if this was to be our last conversation, what would I want to ask of and say to this person who means so much to me? At the end of the session, you walk away with a copy of the interview, and another copy goes to the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress, so that your great-great-great-grandkids can someday get to know your grandfather through his voice and story.
What is the Great Listen? Our annual Great Listen takes this concept and gives it to students. In the assignment, students take advantage of the coming together that often happens around winter holidays by having an intergenerational conversation. They can make meaning of the world, understand someone else's life journey or experience, and partake in listening to understand. The Great Listen is a technology-based assignment originally developed for high school students studying American history, social studies, English, language arts, journalism, drama, ESL, media, technology. It's also been applied successfully as an extracurricular and community-building opportunity in classrooms, out-of-school environments, community centers, living rooms, and kitchens across the country. Young people and people of all ages create an oral history of the contemporary United States by recording an interview with an elder, mentor, friend, or someone they admire. With participants' permission, interviews become part of the StoryCorps archive at the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. This means they become part of American history. Via the StoryCorps online archive, the complete interview is also shareable with friends, teachers, and family. Here's an example of a classic StoryCorps conversation.
What kinds of jobs did you have since first arriving in the country?
We were gardeners, and we were cleaning offices.
I remember the offices.
You remember that? We had the night shift cleaning. That's why, we had to take you and your brother. I didn't have a babysitter.
I have memories of running into everyone's office and eating candy from their candy dishes. I remember being with my brother in our pajamas with the little plastic feet. And I also remember you would always buy us a cup of noodle from the vending machine, right? Like a snack, and then put us to bed on people's office couches. And then you'd carry us to the car when you guys were done cleaning the offices. Right. I remember that. Did they ever know? Did your bosses ever know that you took your kids?
No, I don't think so.
Is there anything that you've never told me but want to tell me now?
When we first came here, we went through a lot of things like not eating. I guess for 6 months your father lost his job, but we never told you that.
I do remember a lot of bean tacos.
But when you ask us why the same thing, remember?
Yeah.
I didn't want to tell you why.
Yeah. If you could do everything again, would you raise me differently?
I would dedicate more time, I guess. I was so busy going to school too that I guess I neglected you a little bit.
No, for me, watching you go to school with 2 kids and trying to make ends meet, that was the biggest inspiration for me to finish college. I thought there's nothing that could stand in my way that didn't stand in yours more. It's the most important thing for me, having gone to college, and I feel like anything I do from here on out is okay because I've already achieved my dream. Everything else is icing on the cake.
Hi, my name is Perry Chinalai, and I'm the Managing Director for Learning and Engagement at StoryCorps. The Great Listen assignment offers a common core aligned way to build classroom community in a virtual or disconnected world. It offers a hybrid online learning model highly adaptable to your learning goals. Adapt it to fit your course requirements. We offer tons of resources and an entire library of materials, which we'll walk you through later. Our recommendations are like an accordion. You can compress them to fit your schedule using as few as 2 classes, or design a 5-week module. It's up to you. The Great Listen is greatly impactful. According to a 2019 participant survey of 834 respondents, 79% felt that after their interviews, they would think of their own lives or experiences as meaningful or important to others. 87% reported that StoryCorps had helped them better understand certain social events, issues, or policies. 94% said that listening to StoryCorps helped them better understand the experiences of people who are different from them. 60% were inspired to speak with a friend, colleague, or family member about a social or political issue after listening to StoryCorps. Our testimonials tell us how impactful the exercise is for both students and educators.
When we were introduced to StoryCorps, I thought, I don't have a story interesting enough to tell. I'm sure I wasn't the only one who was thinking that. I was wrong. Everyone has a story to tell. Whether you think it's interesting or not, that's what defines you. That's what makes you. When teachers take the opportunity to really get to know the students for who they are, it allows them to be better teachers in terms of skills and mastery. They're able to understand the whole facet of what the child is about, so that the students can entrust you with expanding their minds.
That's why, to date, hundreds of thousands of high schoolers have participated in the Great Listen. In this historic year, we invite you to incorporate the Great Thanksgiving Listen in your classroom. It can be as easy as showing our 30-minute video to your students, then asking them to record with an elder, family member, or other loved one. Or you can build an entire unit around the Great Listen.
I want to give you a brief tour of the Toolkit for Educators, which we put out each year. This is for the 2021. Isn't it beautiful? We start out with a nice letter from Dave Isay. In the table of contents, you can see we provide a full lesson plan, additional information, and then finally links to handouts for students. So here we start the lesson plan with objectives and materials. We show you how to teach students why stories matter. We have great questions to ask your class, links to perennial StoryCorps classics, and additional videos like Dave's TED Talks. We show you how to teach students how to craft great questions and how to conduct excellent interviews. We have practice assignments. We have tips for conducting the interview, and finally, closing or debrief, which is the conversation you'll have afterwards. We also have additional ways you can use StoryCorps in your classroom, which covers a lot of derivative work students can create off of their interview and extra credit. We spend some time addressing additional things like fast facts and privacy settings, equipment, parental consent, privacy settings, etc. And at the very bottom, we provide links to handouts for students. So permission slip, questions list, keywording 101, etc. So this is a brief look at our Toolkit for Educators. I also wanted to give you a sneak preview of our additional handout, Activities for Exploring the StoryCorps Archive, which guides you through fun activities that act as a first lesson in doing archival research, or research in oral history. So basically, it's just a list of activities that you can take your students on for extra credit or as part of your oral history unit or part of your StoryCorps unit. This is just a draft, but you can find the final version at thegreatlisten.org in our library of materials.
Hi, I'm Emily Jansen, Associate Director of Learning and Engagement at StoryCorps. For the past 5 years, we've heard from educators who have been using StoryCorps in their classroom and who've reached out to us to share their methodology and best practices. Today, we'll share with you these tips from the field. Remember, think of this as an accordion. You can condense all of this into one lesson using our free lesson plan and 30-minute video as a backbone, or augment your lesson, even creating a 5-week unit using tools from this video.
First, introduce students to the interview. Studying interviews helps students recognize the power of others' voices and stories, and strengthen their own expression as well. Introduce the interview as a manner of first-person inquiry, or a mode of research, a way to learn about another's experience. Invite students to take a self-guided tour of StoryCorps' online archive, found at archive.storycorps.org. Have them create an account to view nearly 350,000 interviews, browsable by keyword, date, language, places, and more. Ask students to find an interview they found interesting. Elicit discussion by asking questions like, why did you find this interview engaging? What did you like about the participant's style? How do you think the pairing or the relationship between the two participants influenced their discussion topics or affected how much they disclosed? Assign a number of StoryCorps interviews to watch in class or as homework. Create a small quiz to help students notice specific parts of the interview. Here are some all-time StoryCorps favorites, all about 3 minutes long. Albert and Aiden Sykes, Eyes on the Stars, Clean Streets, The Temple of Knowledge, Double Major, My Father the Giant, Mi Abuela Panchita, Sylvia's Legacy, No More Questions, The Icing on the Cake, A Life Worth Living. After watching StoryCorps pieces, engage your class in a discussion. Some great prompts include, why are stories important? How do we shape and form our memories? Discuss how two people's memories of the same event can be different, radically divergent, even conflicting, without necessarily being untrue. Why is it important to create a safe space during your interview? How might this benefit your participant, as well as the outcome of the interview? Talk about how to create a space where people feel comfortable telling their stories. With your class, deconstruct a good interview. Discuss what they found compelling, what they wanted to know more about, what they noticed, both good and bad, about the interviewer's style, and most importantly, ask what they connected with. Be sure to bring up two common interview structures, narrative and non-narrative. In a narrative interview, one or both participants recount an event, creating a narrative that follows a classic story arc. The lead participant makes sure each element is represented. There is a beginning, middle, peak, and end. A non-narrative interview often includes a Q&A type portion. This might be a focus interview that is more historical or journalistic in style and might investigate an ongoing issue in your community. Students might interview a community leader involved in solving this problem. Your students' inquiries may take many forms. That's to be expected. The topic of interviewing is covered extensively in our 30-minute video for students. Find the video at thegreatlisten.org. Then click on Library of Materials.
Next, you'll introduce the assignment to your students. In the most popular assignment structure, students will write a paragraph outlining their interview's purpose. Make sure they note their narrator's name and their relationship. Compose an interview request email. Compose a set of questions. Make sure the questions relate to the interview's purpose. Share our great questions list as an inspiration, but encourage students to write their own questions as well. We suggest arriving at the interview with 10 questions. Invite your students to submit questions for grading ahead of the recording day in order to give them a chance to rewrite their questions based on your feedback. Conduct the interview. Write metadata according to standards. In oral history, metadata is information about the interview or its participants. This includes a description, keywords, and more. Our Keywording 101 handout, located in our library of materials, walks students through writing metadata. Write a reflection paper. Popular prompts ask students to focus on the stories they heard, why those stories matter, and what they learned. Share the interview to your class's community page. This is optional. A StoryCorps community page is a landing page where members can post their own interviews. This creates a specific set of interviews that can be shared with one convenient link. Many educators create private community pages for their classroom, a safe, private microsite containing only their classmates' interviews and clips. To learn more about creating a community page, navigate to archive.storycorps.org. Create clips. This is optional too. Students may add these clips to the culminating creative project, which can take different forms. Finally, have students thank their interviewee. Have them send a handwritten thank you note. Be sure they tell them why they chose them.
And now some tips from the field. We suggest giving students 2 weeks to approach their interview subject and schedule the interview. Make sure students tell their interviewees that it's a 40-minute conversation. Remember, as I've said earlier, you can do this on a shorter timeline. Prepare a class community page for students to upload their interview to. Again, this is a community page, a feature of StoryCorps' online archive available at archive.storycorps.org. Decide on a required classroom keyword or hashtag so that you can easily identify the interviews. An example is Lincoln High, Miss Dici, English Capstone 2020. Share this hashtag with students. Remind students the Connect video will not be available online. Only the audio gets preserved. 5 screenshots are taken from the video and attached to the interview record. Students can delete these and add new photos afterwards. Have a plan for students who wish for their interview to remain private. Never pressure a student to make their interview public. If students feel uncomfortable, they can always have the conversation but not record it. Have a plan for when students, their interviewee, do not have access to Wi-Fi. Remember, interviews can be conducted over the phone. Recording with StoryCorps' digital tools, Connect or the app, is not a requirement. As one super user notes, all students get full credit if they did the interview. They're graded on their reflective paper, not the recording.
You'll have some time between introducing the assignment and recording day. Here's how to put that time to use. Get students thinking about what they want to learn in the interview. This will help them formulate their questions. Give them a journaling exercise. What's important to me? What do I want to know more about? Who might teach me something or teach me a new way to think about it? What questions do I have about the world or of someone who's lived in a different generation or in different places than me? Next, schedule practice interviews. We suggest 2 practice interviews. For round 1, the purpose is to practice interviewing skills, being comfortable, and creating a safe interview space. Students pair up and take turns asking questions from the Great Questions list. Each student interviews for 10 minutes. For round 2, the purpose is to get comfortable with Connect or the StoryCorps app. Students pair up based on their technology choice so that both are using either Connect or the app. Each student interviews for 15 minutes using the Great Questions list or their custom questions. Watch live interviews. Students can observe as an educator is interviewed by another educator or a student, or an educator interviews their parent or someone else in their life. Consider incorporating other educators and teachers into your classroom. We've seen successful creative collaborations with drama, art, and history classes and with school librarians. Finally, remind students, don't over-prepare. Ultimately, this is an experience of listening to understand. Do less talking than your interviewee. The experience is less about you and more about your narrator. When in doubt, or when the interview strays from plan, prioritize listening and asking follow-up questions rather than getting through your prepared questions. And finally, tell them, you can do it. An interview at its heart is just a conversation. Now we'll talk about sharing these recordings. Have a plan for students to share their interview with other students. For private interviews, students can share a reflection on what they learned from their experience. Alternatively, students can share excerpted clips or derivative works inspired by their interview. We've heard about incredible successful projects from teachers, like educators creating an online gallery featuring full-length interviews, excerpts, or edited pieces, hosting listening parties where students can choose 2 or 3 stories to listen to and write about their responses. Or students can pick the best 7 to 8 minutes of their own interview and play it for each other in groups of 3. Students can deliver a mock TED Talk, where students record a video talking about the importance of the lesson they learned during the interview. Or have students write a newspaper-style article that uses their interview as a source. Finally, students can draw or paint a portrait of their narrator as inspired by their interview.
Now we'll talk about grading. Be realistic. You don't have time to listen to 60 full-length interviews. Instead, grade on students' questions. Do questions relate to the purpose of the interview? Are they really about the other person or self-centered? Will they generate a good conversation? For narrative interviews, do the questions help the narrator construct a story and tell the story's beginning, middle, and end? For nonlinear interviews, do the major themes resonate throughout the question list? Grade on metadata. Does it align with standards in StoryCorps' Keywording 101 handout? Grade on the quality of the reflective paper. An English class might grade on different skills than a history, civics, or art class. Grade on art inspired by the interview. This could be a poem, sketch, painting, audio collage, or excerpt clips. Grade on participation in a listening party and subsequent discussions.
Time for some Q&A. Here I'll address some common questions from educators like you. Is the age minimum really 13? Yes. Internet laws and respect for youth privacy dictate that we reserve our digital tools for students aged 13 and up. You can always incorporate StoryCorps in your classroom by following our lesson plan without recording. The StoryCorps experience is available to students who cannot record with our digital tools. Doing this opens up the assignment to students in middle school, even elementary school. What about students or their conversation partners who don't have access to the internet? Again, the StoryCorps experience is available to anyone who cannot record with our digital tools. Encourage these students to conduct the interview over the phone or in person. Remember, most educators don't grade on the interview itself, so this challenge shouldn't preclude students' ability to participate. Enterprising students might put the regular telephone on speakerphone and record with a digital recorder to be uploaded to our online archive once the student does gain access to the internet. One note of caution. Our app does not allow students to record a phone call conducted on the same phone. Instead, use a landline or other phone on speakerphone to conduct the interview, then record with the StoryCorps app on another phone. Can students record in another language? Absolutely. We encourage interviews in every language known to humanity. Our great questions list is available in Spanish in our library of materials. And the final question is, can students record on an iPad or another tablet? Yes. If students are using an iPad or another tablet, we recommend recording with Connect. We do not recommend using an iPad or tablet to record with our app. I wanted to take a brief moment to give you a tour of our Great Thanksgiving landing page. What I've done is I've navigated to thegreatlisten.org, which is where we have all of the resources you'll need to get started bringing StoryCorps into your classroom. So as you scroll down, we'll see some introductory items and some didactic videos. And here we come upon StoryCorps in your classroom. You can click on Great Listen Library of Materials, or you can click on Bring the Great Listen into your classroom. Here we are at the page for educators. And if we scroll down, we can either download the Educator Toolkit directly, we can navigate to StoryCorps DIY, which is our online learning platform, but today we're going to go to the Library of Materials. Here you'll find in one convenient location all of the materials that we've mentioned in this webinar. So we have, again, the toolkit. We have 5 classroom posters that really inspire your students to think about what questions they want to ask. We have the Keywording 101 handout. We have a great questions list. Here we have it in Spanish. We have interview planning worksheets, sample permission slips, and more. Here we have our annual Great Listen placemat, which is printable and which is always a favorite of our participants. As we move down, we'll see some of the videos that we've mentioned in today's video, which include Dave's TED Talks and more about the Great Listen. We have the didactic videos that you've seen on the previous page. And then here we have direct downloads to watch or download StoryCorps classic animations, including No More Questions, Eyes on the Stars, and more. These are all great selections for your classroom. And finally, we have videos that are about interviewing. So this is what you can find at our library of materials.
Thanks for watching.
And thanks for participating in the 2020 Great Thanksgiving Listen.
Goodbye and happy Thanksgiving.